Explained by the Billy Meier contacts, mysteries, myths, legends, conspiracy theories, historical inaccuracies, and more, compiled by David Chance, revised July 2, 2025.
Future Earth Humans Part 18. See also Gilgamesh. See also Hyperborea, Hyperboreans. See also Ica Stones. See also Longskulls. See also Men in Black. See also Nazca Lines. See also Nokodemion. See also Ptah. See also Quetzalcoatl. See also Rods. See also Starchild Skulls. See also Teos Caves Metal Library. See also Tunguska Event 1908. See also UFOs Flying Saucers. Contact Report 252.
There I am again, friend Eduard, as I promised you on the 3rd of February to bring you the money for the stickers. 500 francs are from me and 1,500 francs from Quetzal, which he could spare from his collection because he had double. However, we would like to have some stickers for ourselves because we want to collect it.
I have one more question. You have often denied things that have been interpreted differently by Earthlings as true and given. How is that to be understood?
We certainly did that, it is true. But this was always due to the fact that we were not allowed to talk about it because of our duty of secrecy, or because the facts of the questions did not correspond exactly with reality or truth, or because there were simply inconsistencies that made things appear in the wrong light. It was also often the case that the questions were not purposeful enough, and consequently negating or disclaiming answers were given. But we were always honest and never told the untruth, even if we sometimes talked about it, in which you are also a master.
You mean that you often were just beating around the bush?
That is the meaning of my words.
May I ask where the name Pleiadian, respectively Pleiadian, comes from in your language?
The name, which by the way was also transferred from our original languages into earthly languages, comes from the personal names Plejos equals, who follows the laws of creation. Plejada equals who sets 7 stars for sevenness. Plejados equals who knows the laws of sevenness. Plejara equals who respects the laws of sevenness. And Plejaros equals who teaches the laws of unity.
Then I now have a question that has preoccupied me for a long time. Why did practically all your ancestors choose solar systems and worlds to live in, which are in a different space-time continuum than we are here?
Extrasolar planetary systems and solar systems in this space-time structure of the Dern universe can be found relatively seldom because they are extremely rare. In the dimension in which we and all the other Enoch lineage groups live. On the other hand, there are many solar systems in which planets are also classified and which are also capable of carrying a variety of life. Already our earliest ancestors traveled the dimension that is time-shifted to this space-time continuum, in which we live. Consequently, it is known to us and all Enoch lineage groups since ancient times. This means that the many planetary solar systems lie very far apart in this galaxy, the Milky Way. While in our dimension and in our galaxy, many solar systems with planets lie very close to each other or are arranged more closely to each other.
One question, prostitution. Is this not also caused by monogamy? I think that monogamy cultivates it to a great extent. What do you think?
You are not wrong with your assumption. Our ancestors already had this experience with us, which is why monogamy was abolished a very long time ago. And as a result, polygamy gradually prevailed, which is what we have today, and with which we are not only extremely satisfied, but also have very good experiences. And as I explained to you once before, prostitution is no longer known to us. However, the ethical consciousness of our races, which has developed into a very high form, and out of which no more wrong actions arise, also contributed to this to a great extent. Every person of our races has such a highly developed ethics consciousness that sexual relations outside of an open or closed marriage alliance no longer appear. In the case of necessary sexual instincts of non-marital allies, the practice of one's own sexual instinct satisfaction is applied, or the surging sexual instincts are meditatively brought under control. Unless a marriage-like partnership exists that permits sexual practices, whereby such a partnership is not regarded as a marriage alliance, but as an open marriage-like relationship.
Contact Report 253.
My name means the flowering one. My age? I will become 162 years old in December.
Contact Report 254.
Already through Florina, I let you know that it is entirely up to you to write down the conversations, which is why we save them on the responder machines for your telepathic retrievals. You are free to dispose of it according to your will, but for certain things we must continue to keep it secret from the earthly public and also from the group members.
Contact Report 257.
Then I would have another question now, which refers to the coming and appearance of extraterrestrials who have no connection whatsoever with you, and who should actually make open contact with Earth humans. Can I find out, for example, when this time will really be? The date once mentioned to me has become obsolete because things have happened with Earth humans and in their politics, which made the appearance of the extraterrestrials impossible.
The time is relatively close according to our terms, but for certain reasons I will not name the more exact time, because thereby steps could be taken by the terrestrial man, which would thwart everything another time. Then the question should only be answered in such a way that no exact dates are mentioned. It must therefore suffice if I say that the time is relatively near at which people of an alien world will appear openly on this planet.
After which you will finally withdraw, as you have always assured.
That was always the meaning of our explanations in this regard.
Your concepts of time are of course different from ours here on Earth. So your word is a broad concept if you say that the time is already relatively near, when official contact between extraterrestrials and terrestrial humans can be expected.
Time is really not very far away anymore. The only question is whether the military, secret services, and governments will not change the open appearance in such a way that the public will be misled and the real facts will not be falsified and concealed again, as this was done with regard to previous occurrences of a similar kind with extraterrestrial aircraft and beings of foreign worlds.
Let me ask a question about the old Earthlings. Did they also do so primitively and stupidly with the appearance of extraterrestrials? As is the case with today's mankind, especially with the military, the secret services, and the governments, as well as the sectarians.
No comparison can be made in the matter of military, secret services, and governments. Where people acted abnormally, there was actually the delusion in play by which aliens were judged either as devils or as gods. In military, secret service, and governmental respects, however, with few exceptions, no aggressive machinations were common on the aliens, which unfortunately has changed drastically in modern times.
Certain people become more stupid than normal. Extraterrestrials, I am often asked whether then only the Pleiadian Pleiaren come to Earth as extraterrestrials. Naturally, that is not the case, because there exists yet various other extraterrestrials who fly into terrestrial airspace and can also often be observed. They are, in part, members of the Pleiadian/Pleiaren Federation, who cannot however be counted as foreigners, who stem from planets and solar systems that have no state of affairs at all, with the Pleiadians/Pleiaren and their Federation worlds. These foreign extraterrestrials come from the most different star systems, which as a rule, belong to our galaxy. Respectively, the Milky Way, whereby however exceptions also exist, however only very few, in which the extraterrestrials stem from foreign and millions of light-year distant galaxies. There are, however, few like this to note that they can only be spoken of as a rarity. Therefore, the greatest caution is recommended with extraterrestrial contacts in the sky, because too much about this are lies, deception, swindle, charlatanism and speculation, etc., whereby also the truth-despising efforts and falsifications, as well as disinformation machinations of the governments, are implicated through the committal and establishment of unbelievable lies, slanders, falsifications, and trickeries in the world to veil the truth, to contradict and to deny. The Roswell UFO crash is just one of many inglorious examples. Naturally, not all terrestrial governments and military work in this slimy way, but there are many. And they get ever more difficulty from those peoples who are really interested in the UFO clarification and the events connected therewith, as they turn the heat up under the governments, the military, and the secret services. The time namely presses ever more, because ever more UFO incidents take place, and also pure UFO observations increase ever further. So the responsible ones use their lies, defamation, and denial ever less, whereby they apply a new obscuring technique to keep the actual existence of extraterrestrials secret, as well as their visits to the Earth. Their new method is to demonize everything that has to do with UFOs and extraterrestrials. That, thereby, also serves to hinder the coming about of contact with extraterrestrials and civilians, because that can no longer be controlled and because, as a rule, civilians who are not bound by a military or secret service security status do not shy away from making such experiences and events openly known. But such open information is exceedingly uncomfortable and even exceedingly dangerous for the governments, as well as for the military and secret services, etc., as their power structures could become shaky. Of this it was already clear to a whole lineup of authorities as well as their military and secret services in the First World War because, over the battlefields of Europe, UFOs were observed whose appearance was kept secret, however. It went the same direction in the Second World War, as the Foo Fighters surfaced everywhere. Indeed, it was already firmly established by the military and secret services and highest government positions by the First and Second World Wars that UFOs were of extraterrestrial origin, yet the secrecy was still maintained. The facts of the extraterrestrial origins of flying apparatuses was recognized in America through the observation of a landing of such an object, where 4 unusually clothed humanoid beings disembarked, collected some plants in the vicinity, re-entered their device, and flew away. The observers of these events were 2 members of the military who, coincidentally, were in just that area while on vacation. Both reported the event to the nearest military facility, allowing the secret investigations and clarifications to proceed, as had already happened in other similar cases that preceded, and also subsequently occurred even more. But everything happened under the strictest non-disclosure. As the Pleiadians/Pleiaren have affirmed, so the public received no knowledge about these incidents whatsoever, as neither did the main body of the governments, the military, and the secret services. It was always only the very highest positions and officials who were privy to the secrets. And it was also these humans who even then concerned themselves with and worked out concealment tactics to deceive most of their subordinates and the entire population. It was to be avoided that, on one hand, everything would be known, and on the other hand, that those not in the know and not sworn to secrecy, or even civilian personnel, could have contact with extraterrestrials. Therefore, a possibility was sought to place fear in humans in relation to the extraterrestrials, so that no contact would result from a possible landing, or from a crash of extraterrestrial devices. But that was not enough by far, because the longer the UFO appearances in the New Age were observed, the more secretively these were dealt with, and indeed not the least on that account. Because the arrival of the extraterrestrials, and the enslavement of the terrestrial humanity through the invaders, was feared by the American government and their military as well as secret services. And so, that the population should be left in ignorance about the truth of the existence of extraterrestrials. Nevertheless, however, that fear must be developed in the peoples against the extraterrestrials, out of which a far-reaching hate must be established against the invaders. And, thereby, once again a defensive rage steered by hate should result. The U.S. presidency, as well as the leading officers of the military and the secret services, etc., came upon a psychologically sophisticated idea to work out a horror scenario in extraterrestrial matters and to start it in such a way that not only America would be seized by it, rather also great parts of the rest of the world. This scenario should be configured in such a way that once angst and panic should first break out regarding extraterrestrial invaders, thereafter they then spread further fear and hate far, and could spread it over the world, and indeed also then, when it would be officially recognized, that it all only dealt with fiction and therefore a poor utopian piece of work. Thereby the psychological trick would be established, that when once fear is sown, then from that yet greater fear, and finally also panic and hate must develop, that follows itself further, always spreading out farther. A fact that was already known then and also today, yet would be practiced again and again over the whole world in different relationships. And exactly angst and terror were necessary, according to the view of the responsible ones, to incite the population against the extraterrestrials, and to prevent them from coming into contact with them if the opportunity should present itself. Through this perfidious and fully thought-out psychological machination of the highest government authorities as well as the military and secret services, it also should be avoided that at any time, any one of the people would gain admission to the extraterrestrials if the opportunity offered itself. The responsible ones not only had fear of a peaceful extraterrestrial official or unofficial landing and contact initiative, but they also feared an invasion. And because an official or unofficial extraterrestrial appearance and effect on the Earth was not compatible with the religious philosophies, since 1915, Pope Benedict XV, 1914 to 1922, as well as Pius XI, 1922 to 1939, and Pius XII, 1939 to 1958, would also be drawn into the entire conspiracy. Also, certain Jewish dignitaries were enlisted in this, who even at that time in America had quite a bit to say and had a voice. In the most secret of missions, it was therefore resolved to create a horror scenario which would agitate the population on one hand, who, however, should be left in ignorance of the truth of the existence of the extraterrestrials who already maneuvered in terrestrial airspace and also landed sporadically on the Earth, as it has been established from secure sources, and through that, on the other hand, that fear and hate be sown against the strangers from other worlds. The mean and slimy trick was in and of itself simple. A radio broadcast should be transmitted that on one hand spreads angst and terror of the extraterrestrials, and on the other hand should also strike very far, and as much as possible, worldwide circles. To this end, through American Secret Service agents, as well as through the responsible superiors of these positions of duty, as well as the government and militarily, suitable authors and works were sought, which could be exploited and used for the perfidious machination. It was U.S. President Franklin D. Roosevelt, President, 4th March 1933, 12th April 1945, who quite personally, however, sought out the science fiction work of Englishman Herbert George Wells, who as an author, in 1898, brought out a work under the title War of the Worlds. In this episode, American Secret Service agents made contact with Wells and beseeched him coercively to adapt his work to a radio play. But the man himself did not feel in a position to do this, So he suggested chartering a young American author of his acquaintance, Orson Welles, who would certainly be suitable. Under threats of death, H.G. Wells was obliged to lifelong silence. After which, then in America, the still young Orson Welles would be coerced by the Secret Service people to refashion H.G. Wells's work, War of the Worlds, into a realistic-seeming horror radio play. Out of the science fiction novel Wells wrote in 1897 and published in 1898, such a work that broadcast on the radio would release wild panic and angst as well as hate for the extraterrestrials. The work, in which extraterrestrials, formed unlike humans, and of monstrous and evil nature, land on the earth and cause trouble and destruction, was exactly that which had been hoped for by the responsible ones of governments, the military, and the secret services. It's no wonder that as a result of panic breaking out there was quite a number of dead. The goal of the government, the military and the secret services was achieved with the broadcast of the radio play War of the Worlds. Because from then on fear, and also a certain hate, ruled against the extraterrestrials of the kind and form, as well as the sense that was also always desired. And exactly that has remained that way until today, and even still spreads out. Because fear and hate would again always be newly stirred up, and the American Secret Service powers, etc., are especially proficient in doing exactly that. Were that not enough, that they, and certain also determined government and military powers, financially support and demand contrafilms against the extraterrestrials? No, they do not shy from simulating all kinds of horror. Events like, for example, abductions by extraterrestrials, as well as human and animal mutilations and so on and so forth. They are also not inactive in matters relating to the falsification of crop circles, and indeed in the most differing countries. Naturally, in respect of all these things there are also charlatans, deceivers and swindlers and every other sort, yet the Secret Service machinations are probably indeed the worst. Because it is precisely through these that disinformation is established, through which the genuine and actual events in this regard are bedeviled and made laughable. Scarcely anything is known about exactly this, as everything runs so secretly as it always has, and as does the actual story of the radio play of War of the Worlds by Orson Welles. And the danger exists that something could not be held secret. Then the responsible ones of the government and military as well as the secret services do not shy away from bringing the witnesses to silence under death threats or through an otherwise erasing, like, for example, through elimination or through a consciousness-stupefying brainwash and psychoterror and so forth. Herbert George Wells, who died on the 13th August 1946, also knew that, as did Orson Welles, who departed this life on October 10th, 1985. Neither left behind any indications about the true incidents regarding the radio play, as they correctly feared that their families, friends and acquaintances after their demise also could be vengefully persecuted by the Secret Service people and the responsible ones of the government and military. And that I now do not hold my tongue about that which the Pleiadian Pleiaren explained to me in regard to this. What comes of that remains to be seen. The nasty machinations of the government, military and Secret Service people in respect of the demonizing of extraterrestrials have increased ever more since 1938, indeed slowly and successively. Thus, however, all the more incessantly and expansively, until in the 80s, essentially, the greatest machination for the bedevilment of extraterrestrials began, through a shifty structure in the fashion of the Secret Service, as well as miscellaneous UFO and extraterrestrial enemies. Stories came about like the ghastly human and animal mutilations, the theft of human babies and the impregnating of terrestrial women through foreign visitors out of outer space. Horror stories were also disseminated about subterranean laboratories and the inhuman experiments taking place there. Were that still not enough? Because the angst of the extraterrestrials wreaked even worse blooms. Like, for example, it would be asserted that women impregnated by aliens would, after some months, have the baby growing in the womb snatched out to be allowed to finally grow further in a fluid-filled incubator, etc., in order to breed up a new humanity, etc., using these hybrid children. A further horror story was that the Earth humans would be abducted in order to take their genetic material that would be necessary for the extraterrestrials' further breeding of humans, who would serve as, so to say, nourishment providers, because the evil foreigners out of the depths of outer space supposedly nourish themselves on human blood. Similarly, it would also be asserted in respect to the animal mutilations in America, whereby the related far-fetched feeble-mindedness that, namely beef blood, demonstrates a genetic relationship with human blood. Therefore, the mutilated cattle would have their blood sucked out to store in the blood banks for crisis times, naturally through the evil extraterrestrials. Yet even that is not enough, because still many other assertions, slanderings and lies, and clearly to be recognized as feeble-minded, are put about, through which the humans are led into error and would be shifted into angst and terror. As has had manifold success, and certain mass hysteria has been released by a worldwide group of certain Earth humans, which also leads to feelings of hate, etc. Well, then a question about the alleged appearance and official landing of extraterrestrials on Earth. Some people claim that on 27.3, 1997 extraterrestrials should officially land on Earth. Do you know anything about this?
We know these erroneous assertions, which are nothing more than bare nonsense and which are connected with the Hale-Bopp comet, which is also known as Nibiru or Nubiru or Eunice, on which gods live and should now return to Earth.
You explained all this to me years ago. So everything is nothing but bullshit and nonsense what is talked about the comet and the alleged official landing of extraterrestrials on Earth. I would also have been surprised if it had not been like that. Unfortunately, we have so many crackpots here on the Earth, and unfortunately even more misguided ones who believe all the nonsense of these crackpots. Furthermore, there are still many conscious liars, cheaters, swindlers, and charlatans who take advantage of the New Age madness of the believers and make horrendous profits out of it.
Unfortunately, that is the truth.
It goes to the year 2000 and there it is. Of course, like at every turn of the century or the last turn of the millennium. The doomsday mood, the alleged return of the dear Jesus Christ, as well as the coming of extraterrestrials or even of the dear God himself. All nonsense.
Contact Report 258.
All evolution concerns on Earth and consequently also with earthly humankind belong to one of our tasks.
Contact Report 260.
I think this will be necessary anyways, for as I see, the handbook is very extensive, so it would probably be better if I would transmit it into my aircraft during our conversation, in order to work on it later in peace, after which I can then give you the necessary information within the next few days, which we will then probably have to discuss. Then leave me the material now so that I can transmit it with this device here.
But now, here's a somewhat loosening up question. One approached me in reference to whether I knew anything about the use of makeup by the female gender on Era. One wanted to know specifically whether lip balming occurs, even with lipstick, as the women and girls do this here on Earth. For my part, I never saw such with your women.
This isn't common with our female gender in the way that it is with the women on Earth. In general, only a certain part uses subtle makeup from natural materials, while others don't use these things. The makeup is such that it doesn't change the naturalness of the skin, so it can hardly be seen, which isn't the case, unfortunately, with the earthly female gender. But that the lips are coated with colored lipsticks, as the women and girls do so on the Earth, that isn't the case with us, for we have already considered such actions as nauseating since ages ago.
The certain part of female people who use makeup, is this predominant?
Unfortunately, that isn't known to me, but as I estimate, that part should only be small and be more restricted to younger women and girls.
This may well be said of the unfortunately necessary animal experiments, against which, in a general form, protest shouting prevails. Unfortunately, as you yourself once said, certain things can only be carried out and tested on living organisms, which also is not any different with you, even though your animals are not actually such in and of themselves, but are only cultivated experimental. Forms that are quite organic, but not really animalic in the sense that it concerns actual animals, with psyches, and with feelings of pain. Furthermore, you even have the possibility of tests by pure computer programs, as you once explained.
That is correct. But as you correctly said, we do not use live animals, but only specially cultivated organisms that have no feelings of pain as well as no psyche and no consciousness, etc. This form of medical research is extremely limited. However, and is only used when we discover life forms on foreign worlds that are unknown to us in every respect, and about which we, therefore, still have no medical knowledge. For medical research of all kinds, however, which concern our Pleiaren as well as all Federation worlds, and thus also all their life forms of all kinds, we no longer depend on cultivating special organisms in order to be able to pursue the necessary investigations, for in this respect, our computer programs are fully sufficient.
Then another question. Even the people of your worlds and your federated allies certainly aren't so perfect in terms of their organs and bodies. Therefore, surely health or rather physical injuries can come to light, or am I wrong there?
Our medical knowledge and possibilities are so developed that we no longer know diseases.
Of course, I know that. You explained this to me sufficiently. I also don't mean that some diseases can still appear. Rather, I'm coming from the perspective that, for example, there can be accidents and the like, by which health or rather physical injuries can appear.
Now I understand. Of course, accidents cannot be avoided, for in spite of all precautions of the people, such dismal events can occur over and over again.
Good. Now we've brought it to a common denominator. My question about this is, how is a treatment or an intervention handled when, for example, a surgical intervention becomes necessary? Surgery is indeed a very bloody work, I think. Is it also still so bloodily maintained with you?
Of course not, because we have long outgrown this bloody barbarism. Now, our technology relating to this is so far developed that we can avoid all bloody interventions. Our apparatuses and devices, etc., are designed in such a way that open surgical interventions no longer have to be made, for all manipulations in or on the body are carried out in a pure, vibration-related manner. Thus, internal or external wounds, as well as broken bones and torn blood vessels, can be closed, joined, and healed within seconds or a few minutes. The operation of the apparatuses and devices, etc., occurs, of course, through trained doctors and other specialists, including bioorganic electronic androids, simply said. In addition, these are able to transport themselves to any location within a range of 300,000 kilometers, even there where they are needed. This occurs through a teleportation by apparatus.
You mean that they can beam themselves to any location, just like that?
Yes, but that is nothing unusual.
For us Earthlings, it is. Then these androids are true doctors?
Certainly.
With you, is anything also operated within the framework, as here on Earth with the so-called spiritual healing?
No. In addition, I must also say that what is operated under this designation by many people on Earth must be referred to as charlatanism. Of course, exceptions are given, but these are based on suggestion and self-healing.
Then here again is a question about the health of the people on Era and your other worlds. Although you have already answered this question for me once, it wasn't held in writing. Moreover, it is also answered with the fact that there are no longer diseases with you. But still, various people would like to be able to read your answer. So, on Era, or with your people in general, is there still blindness, deafness, disability, and muteness, etc.?
No, all these evils, together with all diseases and infirmities, have no longer appeared for many millennia, which is also connected with our prenatal investigations and necessary medical measures, which are based in the creative law that each newborn life has an absolute right to consciousness-related and physical intactness.
With you, it is not customary and, thus, it also is not common that animals are kept in the human living spaces, such as dogs, cats, birds, snakes, crocodiles, fish, ferrets, tame mice and rats, rabbits and guinea pigs, as well as hamsters and so on and so forth, which you have already often explained.
Contact Report 261.
Apart from the fact that the Pleiades, which we see here from the Earth, are not identical with your Pleiades, and on the other hand, the Pleiades known to us in our universe are only 62 million years old, and therefore still hellishly hot and too young to carry life, or even to have gathered planets around themselves, on which ultimately life would be possible.
This is a fact that is not taken into account by all alleged earthly contact persons because they do not know the relevant facts.
Contact Report 264.
There are several groups of extraterrestrials who function around here on Earth, but to my knowledge you have nothing to do with them. But do they know that you are here?
No, because we also keep ourselves secret from these few. Our directives demand this, but also our security.
Observations of unknown flying objects, a large number of which are certainly of extraterrestrial origin, have become very frequent in recent years. Can you give me the reason?
The time is approaching when the first official contact with Earth foreigners is to take place. The efforts of certain Earth-foreign humans come down to this. I am not allowed to explain more about this, because we are not allowed to intervene in current events that are not directly connected with our own interests. Whether this encounter with Earth humans will actually take place in the near future, however, has already become questionable again as a result of the new political turmoil, which will also increase again in the future, whereby malicious acts of war are to be expected.
Of course not. You have explained that to me very often.
It must be said. However, with regard to the fact that many humans on Earth observe the sky more attentively and see the most diverse, unknown flying objects, and that this is due to the controversy that has been triggered worldwide as a result of your contacts with us, as well as your photo evidence and your person and history. Through this controversy, many humans have become aware of the existence of the Earth foreigners, and consequently, the humans are paying more attention to the heavens. From the whole it follows, however, that very many Earth humans become familiar with the thought that extraterrestrial human life exists.
Contact Report 269.
How do you handle elections if you have to carry them out?
In spiritual leadership, unanimity has decision-making power, as is the case with the people. If there are exceptions, however, where the absolute majority has to decide, which only rarely occurs, then these are handled in the form I have explained to you on various occasions, and have done so again in your interests.
A second ballot in the same matter is right if two parties achieve an undecided result, yes?
Of course. This is correct. But in such a case there must be a casting vote, which can only be given by drawing lots, because there is no other possibility. So you let the final choice in such a case be decided in such a manner as we handle it? By drawing lots to place the two equal parties on rank 1 and 2 so that no conflict of opinion or conscience arises. 13th May, 1996, 14:59 hours. Note: probably a private conversation during contact 256.
It has been some time since you told me that now is not the time to expect official contact between extraterrestrials and terrestrials.
The time is really not very far anymore. The only question with regard to the expected contacts is whether the military, secret services, and governments will not once again reshape the open appearance in such a way that the public is misled and the facts are distorted and concealed, as has been done with regard to previous incidents with extraterrestrial flying apparatuses and beings from foreign worlds.
Apart from you Pleiadians, Shoshpli-Aran, and the members of your Federation, other Earth foreigners visit our world very rarely, and their flying apparatuses can be observed here and there.
That is right, but that is not our concern, because we do not have any contacts to these strangers. We have never done that before. However, it is not to be denied that aliens are sometimes present in earthly area who have nothing in common with us.
On your last visit, you also told me that with regard to the so-called crop circles, everything is no longer of a purely earthly human nature, but that for some time now there have also been foreigner influences at play?
That's also true, but I do not want to go into any more detail about it, because we are not allowed to interfere in things and events that are not compatible with our mission. We must not disregard our directives and therefore not violate them.
Then things have actually changed with regard to crop circle forgeries and certain things, just in the sense that now also extraterrestrial influences are involved.
For quite some time, this is actually swinging wave-based the case. However, this does not mean that the pictograms, etc., are not genuine and cannot be traced back to the Earth foreigners. As always, counterfeits are being made by freeloaders who are not exposed to the swinging waves.
And what is the connection between the pictograms which are created by the influence of extraterrestrial vibrations of forces? I think it's rather stupid that humans on Earth who are not yet highly developed make themselves felt in this way.
So the connection does not exist by coming events within SOL system, and also not by the announcement of the appearance of Earth foreigners whose ancestors came to Earth earlier. The only thing that is certain for us so far is that there are certain extraterrestrial energy influences that influence humans on Earth, among others, so that they are active in making pictograms. This does not mean, however, that everything concerning the so-called crop circles is allegedly of honest origin, that it is traced back to influences of Earth-foreign beings.
Recently I was asked whether it is just as common for you on Era and in your Federation for humans to do plastic surgeries and the like as it is here on Earth. Until now, actually more for the female sex, but recently also more and more for men.
No, such things are frowned upon by us, because all humans with us are of the opinion and conviction that one should age in honor and see and wear the signs of age on the face, hands and body, and never tinker with nature's craft. As you once said, unless uncontrollable circumstances and influences cause physical deformations and devastations, which are then naturally aesthetically repaired and corrected.
Then there is cosmetic surgery, like facelifts, etc., and as is so common among the humans here on Earth, isn't there?
No, I already said that.
Contact Report 272.
And the foreigners? What kind of beam ships or flying apparatus do they have, and what do they want?
Their flying apparatuses bears a certain resemblance to ours, and could therefore easily be confused by the uninitiated and ignorant. What the foreigners want is easy to explain. They appear once every 70 to 80 years on Earth, taking care of all sorts of things that reach into political as well as military and scientific matters, whereby their aim is to make an official appearance at the appropriate moment and to establish open contact with the Earth humans.
And were there contacts to them at earlier times? That is to say, did these foreigners interfere in the earlier concerns of Earth humans?
That was to some extent the case, yes.
Ah, yes. I wanted to ask you how things are with you. When there are floods, avalanches, and landslides, etc., if such events still appear at all, since you can also influence the weather and certainly prevent such occurrences.
It is true that we can control the weather, but we do not do this within the limits of the natural course of the weather and the climate, etc. Stop it or change it profoundly. On the whole, we give nature and all its powers free rein.
Then there will be floods, avalanches, landslides, earthquakes, volcanic eruptions, etc.?
Of course.
And how do you conduct yourselves in these matters? With us on the Earth, it is the case that many human lives are demanded by such events, and that millions and billions in damages are caused. Houses are flooded by floods, but also a lot of fertile land, as well as roads, and all kinds of other things. Volcanic eruptions and violent storms also cause immense damage, as do avalanches and landslides. How do you deal with such events?
We do not have any problems with it. Neither with violent storms, avalanches, volcanic eruptions, landslides, floods, etc. Neither humans nor buildings, etc. are damaged by such occurrences, not even by earthquakes. All buildings of any kind are earthquake and storm-proof, and are secured against earthquakes and storms, so that no forces of nature can harm them. However, this also means that all buildings of any kind must stand on completely safe ground and must not enter any danger zones. Thus, for example, no buildings may be constructed in places where there are steep slopes where sooner or later, perhaps only in centuries, avalanches or mountain slides could descend. Thus, no buildings of any kind may be constructed in the vicinity of volcanoes or in the vicinity of their lava beds. It is also forbidden to construct buildings on the shores of lakes, seas, rivers, streams, and creeks. And so it is forbidden to destroy floodplain forests and use them for construction purposes, as it is also forbidden for the extensive flat areas which absorb the water produced by floods. According to the respective waters, a minimum distance from the shore must be maintained for buildings to be constructed, as must a minimum height above the highest water level measured since time immemorial. For standing or flowing waters, for example, the rule applies that a minimum height of 3 meters above the known highest water level must be maintained according to earthly measures, while the minimum distance to the shore, also according to earthly masses, must be 70 meters. If the water is a sea, the minimum height above the known highest water level for buildings shall be 3 meters, while the minimum distance from the shore shall be 200 meters.
Then there is a question I asked you a long time ago, but you still have not answered it. Obviously, you have forgotten the matter. It is that you promised to clarify when the first extraterrestrial humans came to the Earth. We have already talked about it once, whereupon I also received an indication of the time, but you doubted it and explained that you still could not give exact details about it.
That is right. We had to revise our previous research because new clarifications and research have produced new results. These, however, do not mean that they are final, because certain indications indicate that we must go back even further into the past in order to come across the time when alien human life forms we were moving on Earth for the first time.
Then let us hear what time period you have already researched.
We have found traces up to 234 million years in the past. These are our latest findings and discoveries. However, I have not forgotten your question about these things, but I have been silent about it so far because we're still researching and do not have any final results yet.
Contact Report 273.
All of us who are active here in the earthly space are proficient in the German language, as also, of course, several other languages.
For my part, one have learned 19 different activities, whereby I am mainly employed in security analytics as well as in biological and technical cybernetics.
With me, I can speak of 23 different learned activities or professions, as you call them. Currently, I am dealing with the conventional and quite advanced terrestrial electronics. But my main interests lie in the much finer electronics of nano and ultra-nano technology, and especially in the subatomic technology, the subatomic electronics.
Florina, do you have any knowledge worth knowing about the alien extraterrestrials you and Ptah observed in the airspace around Schmidrudi on the 8th of May 1998?
I am not allowed to give details of important nature. However, I may say that these strangers are very often present in your airspace. We do not know the reason for this, but we have our assumptions.